Admiral Marcus Thorne was a man forged in the unforgiving crucible of deep space. His face was a map of hard-won battles, etched with lines of command and the constant pressure of a fleet on the brink. His uniform, a crisp white with a constellation of medals, was a second skin. At 60 years old, he had seen planets burn and stars die. He had faced down pirates, navigated nebulae, and made decisions that had saved millions of lives while sacrificing thousands. Nothing, he believed, could surprise him anymore. Nothing could shake the bedrock of his resolve. He sat behind a desk of polished metal, the viewport behind him showing the cold, mechanical beauty of the Aegis fleet at anchor. The vastness of space, studied with the distant pinpricks of stars, was a familiar backdrop. A young, nervous lieutenant, barely out of the academy, had just briefed him on the latest skirmish. A salvage crew had run into a nest of Krell scavengers in the Outer Rim. The crew, a mix of hardened veterans and young hopefuls, had been outgunned. They had managed to escape, but not without casualties. "Just one," the lieutenant said, his voice cracking slightly. "A woman from the crew. They brought her back for treatment, but she's been refusing to talk to anyone. The medical officer thinks she's in shock." "Sir?" Thorne grunted, a sound that was both a question and a dismissal. "Send her in." The lieutenant hesitated. "Sir, with all due respect, she's not in the best shape. She's demanding to speak only with you." A flicker of annoyance crossed Thorne's face. He disliked insubordination, and he disliked being treated like a glorified social worker. His time was for strategy and command, not for hand-holding a traumatized civilian. But the lieutenant's desperate plea was clear. Something was off. "Fine," he said, his voice like the grinding of a tectonic plate. "Send her in. Alone." A few moments later, the heavy door slid open with a soft hiss. The woman who entered was not what Thorne expected. He had anticipated a shaking, tearful mess, a bundle of frayed nerves. Instead, he saw a woman in her late 20s, her face pale but her eyes, a sharp, intelligent green, burned with a fierce light. She was dressed in a grimy, oil-stained jumpsuit, and her right arm was bound in a makeshift sling, the fabric torn and soaked with a dark, reddish-brown stain. She walked with a slight limp, but her posture was straight, her chin held high. "I'm Admiral Thorne," he stated, his voice a low, commanding rumble. "You're the one who survived the Krell attack." "My name is Lyra," she said, her voice clear and steady, devoid of the fear he was accustomed to. "Yes, I'm the one. Sit down, Lyra," he said, gesturing to a chair opposite his desk. She ignored the chair and remained standing, her gaze fixed on him. "I'm here because I know what you'll do. You'll send the fleet to the Outer Rim to hunt down the Krell. You'll say it's a necessary reprisal. You'll put more lives at risk." Thorne leaned back, a cold amusement in his eyes. "Is that what this is about? An appeal? You think you can tell me how to run a war?" "It's not an appeal," she said, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "It's a warning. The Krell weren't scavenging. They were guarding something they didn't want us to find. And you know this, how?" he asked, his tone dripping with skepticism. "Did they tell you they had a base? An old military outpost?" "Our scanners didn't pick it up. It was too deep in the debris field, but I saw it. It was like nothing I've ever seen. The scavengers weren't Krell. They were a hybrid, something new. They were bigger, faster, and they moved with a purpose I've only ever seen in trained soldiers. Thorne's amusement vanished, replaced by a deep, weary cynicism. A new Krell variant, the old story. The salvage crew probably ran into an old nest, and the scavengers were hopped up on some experimental junk. It happens all the time. He hit a button on his desk console. Lieutenant, have her taken to the brig for observation? She's clearly disoriented. Lyra's eyes flashed with a cold fire. Disoriented. Is that what you think? I risked my life to get back and tell you this. My captain is dead, and the rest of my crew are still in sick bay. But I made it back because I knew what this meant. I knew it would be you, the one man arrogant enough to think he knows everything. You won't listen to me, will you? Thorne's patience, a commodity in short supply, was gone. I've heard enough. You're a traumatized civilian spouting nonsense. I have a fleet to command. Get her out of my sight. Lyra took a step forward, her limp more pronounced now. A shudder ran through her body, not of fear, but of an old suppressed rage. You won't listen to my words, but you'll listen to my body. You'll listen to what this cost. She reached with her good hand and grabbed the hem of her torn jumpsuit. With a sharp tug, she pulled it upward. The grimy fabric revealed her midsection, pale and thin, streaked with a fresh, angry red. The wound was not a clean one. It was a jagged, messy gash across her lower abdomen, a testament to the brutal, chaotic nature of the fight. Thorne glanced at it, his expression impassive. He had seen 1,000 wounds like it, far worse. He was about to tell her to stop this absurd display when his gaze traveled upward. His eyes, which had processed millions of data points a second in battle, suddenly locked onto something else. Her ribs. They were a constellation of their own, but not of stars. They were a latticework of jagged white lines, a spider web of old, healed scars. They ran across her rib cage, from her sternum to her sides, a pattern of perfect, deliberate cut. They weren't random injuries. They were surgical. They were meant to be there. He had only ever seen a pattern like that once before, in a place he had tried to forget. The air seemed to freeze in the room. The hum of the ship's engines, the distant whispers of the fleet, all fell away. All Thorne could hear was the frantic beating of his own heart. His face, which had been unreadable for decades, now turned to stone. The cynical sneer was replaced by a blank, shocked silence. The scars, he realized, were not just a pattern. They were a map of a forgotten war, a map he had helped to design. Lyra's voice, a steady whisper, broke the silence. Do you remember Admiral, the Cynosure project? They called us ghosts, unseen, unheard, sent to do the dirty work before the fleet even knew there was a battle to fight. Thorne's mind reeled. The Cynosure project was an old ghost story. A Black Ops program so classified it had been erased from all official records. It was a unit of specialized soldiers modified with gene therapy and cybernetic enhancements. They were designed to operate behind enemy lines, to destabilize, to assassinate. and to report on threats no one else could see. They were given a new skeletal structure, a latticework of reinforced polymer and nano, making their bones virtually unbreakable and their reflexes inhumanly fast. The scars on their ribs were the surgical marks of the initial implant. Thorn, in his younger days, had been a junior officer on the team that had helped develop the training protocol for the unit. He had seen the early prototypes, the first candidates who had gone through the painful, clandestine procedures. They were all supposed to be dead, lost in a final, catastrophic mission a decade ago. All of them. Impossible, Thorn breathed. The single word. A testament to the utter collapse of his reality. Impossible, Lyra scoffed, a bitter smile on her lips. I was a ghost, Admiral. One of your ghosts. My designation was Echo. You stood on the platform the day we deployed. You gave us the speech about the long shadow of history we would be a part of. And then you sent us to die. Thorn's mind, a razor-sharp instrument of strategy and logic, was now a whirlwind of memories. He remembered Echo, a brilliant young recruit with a fierce intellect and an unparalleled physical grace. He had watched her on the training grounds, her movements fluid and deadly. He had seen the raw, unyielding determination in her eyes. He had approved her final deployment order, and he had signed her death certificate a year later, along with the rest of her team, when they had gone silent on a mission to a rogue planet. The Krell, she continued, her voice gaining strength. They weren't scavengers. They were a defense perimeter, an old forgotten outpost, just like ours, a black site from a war we never officially fought, a war against something bigger, something the Krell were hired to keep contained. Thorn stared at her, the woman he had last seen as a ghost in the memory of a file, a face on a black screen. He saw the same fierce intelligence, the same unwavering resolve, but also a decade of scars both visible and invisible. He finally spoke, his voice hoarse, strained. How did you survive? We didn't, she said simply. The Krell didn't kill us. They captured us. They've been studying us for a decade. Our enhancements, our weaknesses, they've been creating their own versions. They've been creating something else. We were lab rats, Thorn. All of us. I was the only one who got out. The only one who figured out how to use their own research against them. He finally stood up. His years of command training, fighting a losing battle against the flood of emotion. He walked around the desk, his eyes never leaving the map of scars on her body. He reached out a hesitant hand, stopping just short of touching her. The scars were real? The history was real? The woman in front of him. This Lyra was a ghost made flesh. The wound, she said, her voice softer now, her defiance replaced by a boned weariness. It's a tracking device. A Krell signal, implant. It's what allowed me to escape. I let them put it in me. I have maybe a day, 2 at most, before they find me and the rest of your fleet. They'll come in force, Thorn. They'll come with everything they've learned from my team. They'll come for the Aegis fleet. The Admiral, a man who had commanded galaxies, found himself at a complete loss for words. The shock of her survival, the guilt of his past, the grim truth of her words, it was all too much. His entire worldview, his carefully constructed reality of a clean, heroic war, had just been ripped to shreds. He saw not a civilian, but a soldier he had abandoned. He saw not a wound, but a sacrifice. He saw not a story, but the terrible truth of a hidden war he thought long buried. "What do you want from me?" he finally asked, the command in his voice replaced by a plea. "I want you to listen," she said, her green eyes boring into his. "I want you to trust me. The base, the Krell, the hybrids, it's all a smokescreen. The real threat is what they're guarding. An energy source, a weapon. Something we created, something they stole, and something they've been modifying for a decade. I know where it is. I know how to disable it. But I can't do it alone." Thorn looked at the young woman in front of him, the ghost of a soldier from his past. Her body, a living testament to a terrible secret. He saw the wound, the blood, the pain. He saw the scars. And in that moment, he realized that the bravest, most hardened warrior he had ever met wasn't in his fleet. She was standing right in front of him, asking him to face the ghost of his past. He, the great Admiral, had thought himself untouchable. But the truth, held in the quiet scars of a forgotten soldier, had just knocked him out in a second. He was no longer commanding a fleet. He was being led by a ghost. "Tell me everything," he said, his voice now a quiet echo of the command he had given so long ago. "Tell me everything about the Krell, about your team, about the weapon. Tell me everything, Lyra. We're going to need a new battle plan."